I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. What a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Maybe you could kick off with a brief introduction to your documentary, The Princess. For people who don't know anything about it, what can they expect?
Sure. So The Princess is a theatrical feature documentary that tells the story of the life of Princess Diana exclusively through contemporaneous archive material from the time. And I guess our ambition is that this archive-only approach not only allows us to reframe the story for a modern audience, but also hopefully allows us to turn the camera back onto all of us and ask ourselves some difficult questions about our relationship to Diana, our relationship to monarchy, perhaps even our relationship to celebrity more widely, and the bit that's most interesting to me, which is what was our role in this story? What was our responsibility? What was our complicity?
Well, you answered quite a few of my questions there, so very good introduction.
Dig into lots of detail now.
My first sort of, to play devil's advocate, I suppose, slightly, and even for myself, when I saw, the synopsis, another documentary about Princess Diana, because definitely I feel like I grew up, my mum was one of these people who's totally obsessed with Princess Diana. So I think we had every glossy mag and book that was ever written about her. We watched even the funeral. I think we sat and watched, and I've seen so many things about her. So you could start from a point of view of, have we heard enough? Have we read enough? Have we watched enough? But I think watching this documentary, actually it feels like something new yet again, because of the form it's taken, because of some of the things that you show that maybe I felt like I hadn't seen before. So why make another documentary about her, and why now?
I mean, I've been wanting to make this film for probably 4 or 5 years. I mean, the original reason for wanting to make this film was, aside from anything else, I do think it is one of the defining stories of our time. And I think when you kind of look at it and break just the story down, it does almost feel Shakespearean in nature. And I kind of don't say that lightly, but there's something about this story, about Diana, about what she represented, that seemed to kind of get under the skin of a lot of people. And I think continues to do that, right? Like 25 years after she died, she's still on the front pages of our newspaper every month. And so you're right, the challenge for us was, there's only point telling the story, making another film about Diana, if we feel like we have something new to say or a new perspective to offer up. And my take on it was that a lot of the documentaries that have been made to date have been consciously quite interior. Their objective is to try to get inside Diana's head, to analyze her psyche, perhaps to break down the marriage breakdown, perhaps to try to understand how things that happened in her childhood might have affected her later life. All of which is really interesting, but inevitably does involve like a degree of speculation. And the thing that I felt hadn't been explored as much in the whole Diana story, and that I felt was more interesting, for me at least, was, what does Diana's story say about all of us? And so the whole point of this film is, in a sense, to try to kind of, as I said, turn this camera back onto all of us and allow the film hopefully to act as a kind of a mirror, to make us, to force us to confront our own complicity. And hopefully that archive-only approach does that. Normally when you make films like this, you would interview people who knew Diana, who were involved in the story, and they would give you hindsight analysis. They would tell you about what happened. They would tell you what they thought Diana was thinking at the time. They would tell you how you should feel about what you're watching. We get rid of all that. There's no headshot interviews. There's nothing. The archive is the film here. And so in a sense, we're trying to create a film in which we give audiences the space to come to their own conclusions, to draw their own inferences, to see their own parallels to things that might have happened more recently. But we're also highly aware that you'd have to be living under a rock for the last 25 years, not, as you say, to have just consumed this story, right? We've all seen The Crown, we read books, we've watched documentaries about Diana. We know that. We know audiences are all going to come with their own individual baggage, their own individual hindsight analysis of Diana. And so the point of this film is, in a sense, to try to give space for people to come to their own conclusions and bring their own hindsights to bear on a story that happened 25 years, and hopefully through that process kind of see it afresh.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it almost, it's one of those things that you don't realize straight away when you start watching it, what feels different about it, because it's the absence of something rather than something that you've applied. And it's the complete lack of voiceover, no talking heads. And suddenly you're hearing Diana's voice almost speak for herself in a strange way. All the interviews speak for themselves, with no one,
Right.
exactly as you say, trying to tell you what to think. And it made me think of the documentary about Amy Winehouse, Amy, which took a similar approach. I didn't watch that for a long time. So yeah, was that
There is
something?
a similar approach. I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely. Look, there are not that many films that be made in this kind of archive-only way, because they're hard films to make. And Massive, who made Amy and Senna and Maradona, you know, they're the kind of films we all wish we could one day make. He's a genius, and I think when those films work, and his films really do work, they feel incredibly immersive. You know, this is a story that happened 30 years ago, but you don't feel like that. Hopefully, you know, we want to use the archive almost like a time capsule, you know, to pick our audience up at the beginning of the film and throw them back into their own kind of collective nostalgic past, and not allow them to escape. You know, there's no escape. There's no headshot interview to allow you to escape. You're forced to stay in that moment, and you're not given any privileged access either. You know, we don't take you inside the palaces. We don't take you behind the high walls. The whole point of this film is to force you, in a sense, to allow you to relive this story from the position that we all did at the time. The difference is that this isn't just about reliving the story. Because we've consumed all this analysis and reanalysis, we want people to bring that hindsight to bear, and hopefully through that process, yeah, the story will feel fresh. But the kind of the central question, when I was 11 when Diana died, it was very vivid for me, as I'm sure it was for millions of people around the world. And it really did feel like time just stopped. You just got the sense that like the tectonic plates just like, well, they were shifting at that point. And you know, it was like a flag in the sand moment. And you know, I remember vividly watching the TV in the days after she died, and just watching grown men and women take to the streets of London, and this extraordinary kind of outpouring of grief, right? And as an 11-year-old, I was quite confused as to what was going on. You know, I didn't feel sad because I wasn't old enough to feel invested in the story. I just remember thinking, like, what is it about this person? You know, how has someone created this extraordinary bond with so many people that when she tragically died, people were grieving as though they'd lost their own mother or daughter or child, you know? And so in a sense, the starting point for the film was like, why did tens of millions of people cheer her on when she got married? Why did, for almost 2 decades, we dissect everything she did, everything she wore, everything she said was on the front pages of our newspapers? And then, as I say, why after she died did we, or many of us, because it wasn't everyone, but lots of people react in the way that we saw on our TV screens? And so hopefully the film and our formal approach to the film allows us to get to some of that complexity and some of the emotional truths that are kind of lurking in and around there.
And can you tell us a bit about your process? Because like sort of mentioned, like a lot of the scenes and the interviews seem familiar, but I feel like there's lots of new snippets in there that I haven't seen before, or perhaps you see a fuller part of an interview that, you know, you've just seen many times, kind of a clip of. So where did you even begin? And did you kind of go back and watch? I mean, I guess we've got films like Spencer, like you mentioned, The Crown. Did you go back and rewatch all that, or did you kind of start from a bit of a clean slate?
I tried to start from a clean slate. I mean, I did a lot of research. You know, you always do. That's part of your responsibility as a filmmaker, to really try and understand the story and the subject. I talked to a lot of people off the record. And then really it was just like about gathering archive. I mean, one of the great challenges with this film in particular was that, you know, for 16, 17 years, Diana was one of the most filmed and photographed people on the planet. And so the sheer volume of archive that exists about Diana is enormous and kind of overwhelming. And the first 6 months of our filmmaking process was really just us watching archive, like 8, 10, 12 hours a day, just watching this archive as it came in and trying to find within that archive moments that kind of spoke to us or we responded to, you know. And because so many films have been made, because there's nothing revelatory in the story, there's no twists and turns that we don't already know. That isn't the intention of our film. The purpose or the impetus is then on us to find in that archive like those little golden moments that actually do reveal something that we perhaps hadn't known before. And so a lot of it was looking through the archive and trying to find body language, you know. And I think I came to feel that Diana, you know, I think of her almost like a silent movie star, you know, where she didn't speak that much publicly, and yet she did have this extraordinary understanding of imagery and the power of her own imagery. And I think she early in life, maybe it wasn't as conscious, but became more conscious, perhaps, like this ability to non-verbally tell us how she felt, you know, and or communicate non-verbally with us. And I think you see it in the archive, at least I felt I did. And it's trying to sort of lean into those kind of moments, and build scenes around that, so that the experience of watching the film is that it kind of plays out in the present tense, you know, that things are unfolding in the present tense and you're forced to respond to them in the present tense, rather than it ever feeling like a history documentary about a subject or a story that happened 25, 30 years ago.
And what I also think is quite unique about this documentary is, like you say, it's all the archive footage, but you're not just using the bits where we have Diana and we have Charles. There are these things from Question Time. You hear the chatter of the photographers amongst themselves. And that has an impact. You see the people on the street and what they're saying to each other, you know, as we're waiting for her to come out on her wedding day. And it kind of makes you realize, it kind of gives that context of how people were just discussing them all of the time. So even though it's something that's continued to happen after her death,
I think that's right,
all through her life too.
It was, and I was kind of taken aback by just the sheer extent of that. I mean, I remember the final summer before she tragically died. I do remember that there was this constant, it felt like this constant debate about, you know, where she was, who she was with. People had very strong opinions on everything she was doing. And as you go back into her life, you realize that it wasn't just that final summer, it was every summer and every winter of her life. We were commenting all the time. And there was this constant national discourse. You know, when I say all of us, some people clearly weren't. Some people didn't want anything to do with it, but a lot of people did, and formed very polarizing, strong opinions. And there seemed to be this kind of national conversation, this chatter happening around kitchen tables and around in pubs, up and down the country through most of her life. And the film is, in a sense, trying to bring some of that back to life, you know, and that conversation becomes like a Greek chorus for us, you know, that everyone, whether you're a royal expert or just a normal person, you know, everyone seemed to have a voice, everyone seemed to have a stake in this story. Everyone felt like a strangely kind of like possessive about this story, or they felt like some ownership perhaps over Diana or what she represented. You know, people had this very strong connection and people felt very strongly about it. What was interesting was that when we started making this film, it was just around the time that Harry and Meghan were leaving the UK and going to the US. And it was interesting that then again, not everyone, but a lot of people, it seemed like that was all that the country wanted to talk about for weeks and weeks and weeks. And everyone took sides, and it became this very polarized debate, right? And it sort of reminded us of all the footage that we were looking at from 25, 30 years ago. And so in a sense, the film is a kind of critique of that. It's a critique of that constant speculation. It's a critique of all of our decision or ability to take this story and sort of turn it into entertainment, to turn it into a soap opera, like a national sitcom for ourselves, for our own entertainment. You know, the film is hopefully asking a question, which is like, we want the fairy tale. Lots of people want the fairy tale, but at whose expense or at what cost? And my hope is that the film, our specific film, like, does force us to re-engage with what our complicity was, what's our responsibility, what's our involvement in that bigger picture.
Yeah, and that was going to be my final question, really, is what you hope people will take away, because it does feel like a lot of themes come out through watching it. Kind of our idea, our obsession with royalty in the UK, even though if you think, you know, in this day and age, you know, is it right that we still have a monarchy, but we're still obsessed? But also I was watching it and I felt quite viscerally like disgusted with how, you know, she was being hounded, and that kind of the misogynistic or sexist lens through she was viewed, you know, and everything she was doing. And then I suddenly thought, but has that changed? Have we learned from what happened with Diana? And probably, like you say, Harry and Meghan, or how many, you know, Britney Spears, you know, what she's been through. Have we? I don't think we have learned. So, and are we complicit, you know, by consuming this stuff?
Well, I think I personally feel we are. Look, this film isn't about blame. It's not about like me handing out, or any of us handing out blame or assigning blame. It is just about us as adults trying to be honest about the impact that decisions that we make have. And if we engage in this kind of turning stories into entertainment, that there is a cost there, and we should just be, I think we should be honest about that, and honest about our own involvement in that, and so that's what that film is hopefully about, because the Diana story has been told over and over again, and it's very easy, and it's been done many times to tell this story and say, well, it was the press's fault. Clearly in our film we see press excesses, we see the paparazzi overstepping the boundaries, and there's no defense for that. That isn't the whole story. We are also creating a demand for those, and so it's just trying to be honest about the kind of bigger picture, and have a slightly wider conversation than just kind of assigning blame to one to the tabloids or whatever. It just doesn't feel like that oversimplification kind of helps us in terms of trying to make sure that if there are things that I could learn from this story, that we actually do learn them, we kind of put them into practice going forward, so that stories like this don't happen again.
I think I'm out of time, but maybe you could just quickly tell us what you might be working on next. Do you have another documentary in the pipeline?
Well, I don't actually. I mean, the strange thing is that I've been working on this for so long, it's been in the back of my mind. This has always been the one I wanted to kind of do next, and then it was strange, but yeah, COVID, because we haven't filmed interviews with anyone, it was a sort of slightly odd COVID safe project, because we were able to make this from our bedrooms, and we literally did make this film entirely from our bedrooms. But yeah, it's been a bit all consuming, so I haven't got anything lined up yet, which is kind of exciting, so on the lookout for new stories.
Not Harry and Meghan then. They won't be. We continue your royal theme.
We've done 2 years. It has been an amazing thing. I feel like I've learned a lot, but yeah, no idea what's next.
All right, lovely to chat to you. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us.
Really nice to meet you.
For everyone else to see The Princess. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Cheers.
so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.